Okay, well, welcome all you wiretappers out there back here in studio Gangland Wire. I've got our good friend and co-host Cam Robinson on the line here. Hey Cam, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Gary. Doing great. Glad to be here.
How's everything up there in Munster, Indiana?
We are good. We got a beautiful day today. I think we are finally done with winter, and COVID cases going down. Everything is kosher.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to be driving back into Chicago here pretty quick,
Yeah,
aren't you? Ooh,
yeah. We got. I'm heading back into the city for work, and I'll be glad to get out of the house. I mean, I know that you're back on the golf course, and it's
yeah.
good to get back out, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. Even have met some people at lunch or dinner. Actually, as long as we can sit outside, I'll do it. I won't sit inside with a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
But and I finally rode in the golf cart with somebody the other day, and I think you're okay there too. It's
Yeah.
mainly being trapped inside with
Indoors.
people,
Yeah.
and nobody's got a mask on and that kind of thing. So I still wear a mask in some places that I go into, and still about half the people probably are wearing masks, like at Walmart or something like that, or Lowe's. I've had to go in there a couple, 3 times. And some people do and some people don't. I just go ahead and wear it. Better be safe than sorry. Plus, I'm old.
Well, I wear one everywhere now. I got to take a risk. For a while, I'm going to be wearing it.
Yeah, it's probably a rule when you go back into the office. You have
Oh
to wear
yeah,
your mask.
yeah.
Are you keeping part of your people home because to have room so everybody can keep spread out, or
And
did you have?
the office that I'm working in, yeah, they're working at about 75% capacity. And the
Okay,
in the yards, no, they've got everybody, but there are limits and spacing as far as going into the yard offices. But the office where I'm working at, they are at 75% capacity. And in common areas, there's masks and limitations on how they can
yeah,
function.
yeah. Out in the yards, railroad yards where you're outside, like, I feel you're pretty safe outside more
Yeah,
than.
they've they've got masks that the company issues. So
Yeah. I even went down to the demonstrations just to kind of check it out, and get a firsthand look that they're reasonably close to my house there. And boy, there was a whole bunch of people packed in there close, cheek by jowl, as we used to say, that did not have masks on. A lot of them did, but a lot of them didn't. And those
mhm.
poor cops, they had the gas mask on for a while, but then they took them off. And they were all over each other, and some of them had masks on and some of them didn't. There didn't seem to be a rule on that, so I don't know. We'll see if any big COVID spikes come out of the demonstrations. Or we had a big deal down the Lake of the Ozarks. This made the national news, where they had a picture of a whole bunch of people in a swimming pool and lounging in an area around it right after the first time that the governor
Remember
said you
that.
could do that. And last I read, that was a couple of weeks ago. There's only one case that came out of it, so I don't know what. This damn thing is crazy, and it's everywhere and it's nowhere.
That's right.
So I just know I'm an old man. I don't want to get it.
Hell no.
I had asthma as a kid, and I tell you, there's nothing worse than not being able to breathe, man. Anyhow, moving right along, the Great Bookie Robbery, Melbourne, Australia, April 21st, 1976. So Dan Bashford and my friend Farrell, I hope you guys are happy. This is our second Australian stories, and we do want to take care of you guys down in Australia. Can we have quite a few fans down there? I just can't really have their names of them, but I get quite a few hits down in Australia. And so this will be our
The
third Australian story, and there's a lot of crime down there, isn't there?
the underworld or the underbelly in Australia, as I've heard it said, they really have a lot of interesting characters down there. It's
They do.
really, I mean, a lot of really colorful bunch. And there was a really good series in Australia called Underbelly, and they covered different
Oh yeah,
periods of time. That was a damn good show, and it really got me turned on to Australian crime groups, and I really did a lot of reading on them, and man, just a lot of fun.
So where do you find that Underbelly? Is that on Netflix or Amazon?
It was on Netflix a couple years ago. Now you can catch it sporadically on Prime.
Okay.
Different seasons. I think season 4 and 5. The first 3 seasons were what I liked. I need to get caught up on some of the later ones, but might have to buy them on Prime. But
okay. I saw that some references to it, maybe something on YouTube, and I know it was about Australian, but I was busier than heck at the time, and I didn't really try to watch them. I have to get back and take a look at those.
you might be able to catch it on YouTube. Honestly, you can probably catch a couple episodes on.
Yeah, a lot of times these bootlegger kind of guys will take something that's popular like that, and it'll be kind of low quality, low res,
Yeah.
but they'll slip it up there until they get
Yeah.
caught.
Yeah, that's right.
I had a guy that was doing mob documentaries with National Geographic. They was taking them and manipulating them a little bit, and he got away with it for a while. And he even took part of mine and part of another guy's that had something about Kansas City and put it together and put up his own mob documentary based on mainly on stolen stuff from mine. I got hold of him. I messaged him. I think I told this story before. I messaged him and I said, "Hey, dude, at least you could do is put up a reference to my website or something." He answered right back and he said, "Okay." He did, and he did.
He's an honest bootlegger.
Really, really. Anyhow, the Great Bookie Robbery. That is I like caper stories, as you know. The Hole in the Wall Gang, I love doing that one. I've worked on the Pure Later case, and I've got a book on that, just on the Pure Later case. It kind of periphery touched on the outfit. It was one of the largest armored car. Well, actually, it wasn't an armored car robbery. It was the armored car headquarters robbery of Pure Later armored cars. I think in the United States at the time. And let's see, have I done another one? I can't remember. I think I've done another one, but I love, the Vault. We talked about the Vault robbery.
That movie's on Prime now. I just watched it.
It is. I just watched it. I did. I just caught that. So anyhow, let's talk about this. Kind of interesting. The guy, Ray Chuck Bennett, was known as the General because he acted as a general. Tell me a little bit about this Ray Chuck Bennett.
Ray Chuck was known as a really smart guy, a career criminal, a crim, and he was known as a planner. He was a well-known bank robber and smuggler. He left Australia in the 70s. He was part of what they call the Kangaroo Crew in England. I guess they were all a bunch of Aussies, and they they pulled a bunch of heists all over England. And I don't know if they probably didn't name themselves that. It was probably assigned to them. But they pulled a bunch of heists. They did eventually get caught, and they were sentenced to jail in England. While he was there, he met a British crew named the Wembley Mob, and they had these militaristic methods of robbery. They were all ex-military guys, as I understood it, and they were really by the book in how they approach things, kind of like a lot of the American bank robbers did in the 30s. How they had a lot of right by the book ways of doing things and really procedural. And he worked with them and he really studied, and using a lot of their tactics, he planned this robbery of a place called the Victoria Club, the cash office, which would be where the bookies for all the races. The cash office would be the armored truck would arrive with all the cash, and the bookies would all tally it up in the cash office, and then they would apportion each to everybody who had gambled, and it was just it's where all the bookies would get all their cash for payouts and different things. So it was a total cash business. It was unreported because they were all crooked, and if you're dealing in total cash, you're only going to report maybe 10% of it tops. And so Ray Chuck knew that, kind of like what went on with the movie Vault, where there was a bunch of undeclared valuables in a giant vault owned by criminals. It's basically untraceable, and nobody could report it. So he knew how many men it would take, kind of like Lufthansa, and he put a team together.
So like the Victoria Club was like a club, maybe a bar, and the bookies, this
Like
was not an off-track betting spot. At first you think, well, this is an off-track betting spot, but no, it was individual bookies would be out working with their customers, and this would be a place where they could take their money in and people could come in maybe and get paid or something like that. Anyhow, the money would all end up from all the bookies.
I think they had. I think it did
Melbourne.
have some track. I think it did have some off-track betting. I couldn't really tie down what it is, but I think it was off-track betting, or they. I mean, I think it was off-track betting. It might have been sports betting. I think it was just a general sort of a club where people did come in to make all kinds of all sorts of betting and things. Yeah.
Okay. Of course, and we know the law enforcement in those days was not the sharpest and probably being paid off also, and so they could operate something like this.
Right.
So and you know, it's perfect to hit a bunch of criminals. That is the best victims, as long as you can get away with it, as long as they don't figure out who you are, because you know they all live in the same basic world, and
Exactly.
it's going to be hard to get away from it. You know, they talk about. I heard some comment about like law enforcement up in north suburbs of Chicago, Oak Park, where Ricardo lived. Well, they didn't really need the cops because they had the outfit.
Yeah.
And I say, well, yeah, as long as the people doing the stealing were like some kind of guys that were connected around and knew people in the outfit. What if a whole big crew of teenage kids came out of the South Side and went in and kicked in a door and robbed a bunch of houses, kicked in some doors, robbed a bunch of houses up there, then took it all back to the South Side? They're never going to figure that one out. And even if they do, they're never going to be able to go find them. So yeah, you know, criminals can enforce a lot of things within themselves, but once somebody comes in from the outside that they don't know, why, you know, they're just as helpless as any other John Doe citizen.
Yeah.
That's when they need the cops. So who were these? Who was it, Ray Chuck? What was? We don't really know much more about him other than, you know, he went to England and came back.
Yeah, he was a, like I said, he was a career criminal. But what we do know about Ray Chuck and a lot of the guys is that they were all members of this federated ship painters and dockers. What they, you know, the dockers, the painters and dockers, they call them the dockies. It was you know, it was a trade union. They were responsible for shipbuilding, but really it was kind of like the Teamsters or the laborers. These guys worked in pretty harsh conditions, so you knew who you could depend on. But in addition, a lot of the people, and I don't mean to cast aspersions on people who were dockies, but there was a criminal element. And like with any unions, a lot of these guys who had no-show jobs and or ghost jobs, as they called them there, they you knew who was on the take and who was not. And so working with these guys, you knew who was corrupt. And so these guys worked in close quarters. And so Ray Chuck chose a lot of his guys from fellow members of the dockies. And you see this a lot throughout Melbourne. And then later on during the Melbourne gang war into the 80s, you see a lot of those guys were painters and dockers. And throughout the 70s, you get a lot of the wars in prison. The guys are painters and dockers, guys who are fighting with like Chopper Reed in the prisons. They were painters and dockers were at war. So you get a lot of instances of the painters and dockers and a lot of criminal investigations into them. Now I'm sure that not even most of them were bad, but I know that there was a criminal element, just like there was in the Teamsters, just like there was in the laborers. Again, I'm probably a small minority. It was eventually deregistered because the membership had fallen down below 1,000, but there was a lot of criminal investigations into it. So Ray Chuck chose his team members, most of them from fellow painters and dockers who were also steeped in the criminal world.
Yeah, it's kind of like Frank Sheeran with the Teamsters. He was kind of the Frank Sheeran of that, or like Danny Green with the Longshoremen. So, I mean, unions, historically, I worked at the Ford plant in the United Automotive Workers, and we had one guy, Cowboy Ray Ridinger, he was my committee man, would come around, and I knew he was kind of shady. One time they found somebody pried the payphone off the wall and opened up the cash part of it and then dumped it. And behind our line, and somebody, he came through there, and somebody pointed out, said, "Hey, Cowboy, look at that." And he picked it up, and he like started wiping, made a big production out of wiping the fingerprints off of it. And I thought, well, why would he even think about that? So fast forward a few years later, and I'm on the police department, and I hear about this TAC unit that was serving a drug search warrant on a drug house over on the east side, and they shot the pit bull that came charging out at him. And they said it was owned by some guy called Cowboy. I said, who? And I knew he came from this particular area. They called it Dog Patch. So I checked into it. It was Cowboy Ray Ridinger, and he had a whole drug operation going on over there. He was a guy that, dealt in stolen parts, and I watched him pay off a new foreman over there one night, or new foreman paid him off. He was our committeeman, and we had a brand new foreman, and they had a dice game going, and I was holding the light for it, the flashlight, out in the back of the Union Hall, and Cowboy would make pass after pass, and then he'd lose the dice out in the dark. And then one time I shined a light over there, and he's, no, don't do that. And about that time he found the dice, and he handed them off to this foreman, who would then lose. He'd throw some money out there, and he couldn't make a pass for anything, and the dice would go around, and he'd finally get back to Cowboy, and all of a sudden they'd go out in the dark again, and he'd get them back. Then he'd make about 5 straight passes, and the only person fading him was this foreman. and that foreman was a friend of mine, so I saw him a few days later. And I said, he was cheating you the other night. And he said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And just said, and in hindsight, all of a sudden I realized he was just paying him off by intentionally letting him cheat him. The foreman was, lost about, I bet $1,000 in about 30 minutes time that night. But I bet he didn't have many problems with the union when somebody had a grievance and they went to Cowboy and it was against his foreman. I bet he didn't have any problem at all. I bet that grievance got shit canned pretty quick. So, most unions have those guys in there that do that.
Parlay that payphone money into quite an empire.
Yeah, really. So tell me about the great Bookie robbery. This seems to be their masterpiece robbery of 1976. Yeah.
So you get Ray Chuck puts his team together. They start training. He plans a job, and this shit's good. I mean, he rents an office 2 floors above the Victoria Club, and so at nighttime they learn the building. They go throughout the building. They learn what's what. They break into the Victoria Club at night, and they do practice runs.
Really?
They rig the elevators. They make them constantly jam between floors, so the elevators don't work well. They bypass the building security overnight. They cut the bolts of the fire escape door. They undo the bolts. They cut them in half, and then they lightly glue them, so that when they kick the fire escape door, it'll just explode right off the bolts. So they totally rigged the building. I mean, they're in the Victoria Club practicing this shit from their office overnight. They put together a bunch of weapons. They're working out every day, getting in shape. Each man goes out separately to put together the weapons that they'll need, because if they all go out and get all the guns at one time, it'll draw a lot of attention, especially when this job pops off. If they all go out, so he chooses for his men 3 guys. Ray Chuck is close to these other 2 guys. It's Laurie Prendergast and Vinnie Mickelson, and they choose these 2 brothers, Brian and Les Kane. And then a couple guys, Ian Carroll and Normie Lee. So you've got these 2 factions of Ray Bennett, Laurie Prendergast, and Vinnie Mickelson, and then Brian and Les Kane, and then 2 guys who were neutral. I was looking at the pile of guns that they got, though. It was the cops later found the guns, and I didn't really recognize them. I thought it looked like a cross between some Sten guns and maybe some of those German MP40s. And I looked it up. It was actually what's called an Austin submachine gun. It was an Australian submachine gun, which is literally a cross between a Sten gun and a German MP40.
Oh, really?
They had 3 or 4 of these submachine guns, and they did have a Tommy gun, and they had a couple shotguns. So these guys were armed to the teeth balaclavas. I mean, they had 4 machine guns and 2 shotguns. So
Wow.
they worked out for months, rigged the building, and there is one version of the story that they had a safe in their upper office, that they had moved a safe up there, and we'll get to that in a minute. The day of the robbery comes off, and the armored truck got a flat tire, and it's 15, 20 minutes late.
Oh,
So
wow.
you've got all these guys waiting.
Keyed
Yeah,
up.
exactly. And minutes turn into hours when
Yeah,
you're
oh,
all.
yeah.
And what they did was they pulled up in a panel van, and they had a real large semi truck that they had a knock in the engine and was smoking really bad. They figured if it's making a lot of noise, nobody will hear it. So they parked the van in the alley, and they pulled the truck right up in front of it in the middle of the street. And they figured, well, it'll slow down traffic and it'll make so much noise nobody will hear us. And they kicked the fire door off the hinges, comes right away. And there are about 118 people inside. They've got balaclavas on. They subdue everybody. Nobody gets hurt. They're inside for about 11 minutes. And they use the bolt cutters because the cash is just in little locks in boxes. They cut all the boxes, get out with 118 calico bags, those leather bags of cash, and they were in there for 11 minutes.
There was 100 and some people they had to hold guns on. Man, that's dicey there. You got that many people to watch and hold at bay, man, because you may have a hero back there in the back that has his own firearm.
Yeah, between all the bookies and the armored car people and the people who worked in the club, there were a lot of people. So they got them. They got them, and they put away. They had really trained for this. They knew, because the bookies were there waiting for their cash. I mean, you've got guys who were raring to, they knew that this is their cash that they're not going to get back. So there's 2 stories about what happened after the robbery. Either, and the lawyer of Normie Lee's lawyer said he got 2 versions from Normie Lee. And Normie Lee had long since died when his lawyer finally revealed what happened. But he said he was told 2 things. That either they took the money, and while everybody was detained, they ran up the stairs to their office and locked it all in a safe, the safe that they had pre-planted, and then they all sprint down the steps with a couple of empty bags, throw them in the van, and peel out and take off, while the semi truck is out front blocking traffic and backing up traffic and preventing the cops eventually from getting there. And the other version is that they actually did run out with the bags, throw them all in the van, and then leave with the actual cash. Based on the lawyer, who sort of was winking and smiling, I think that they had carried the cash upstairs, locked it in a safe, and the cash stayed on the premises for several weeks, and they slowly moved it out of the building. I mean, that seems to be, and maybe that's just a romantic, thought about how ironic it would be. But the lawyer seemed to. That's a strange story for him to come up with on his own when everybody sees these guys running out.
Yeah, how would you? I mean, why would you even think of a story like that? And these guys, they had trained. I noticed they were going out jogging and boxing and trained for months, like they were, gonna participate in the Super Bowl or something, and got all this material together, guns from all over the places, and there's different trucks, and broke in and out several times just to have it all set up and get familiar. They had a layout of it and did practice run throughs, and everybody had an assigned job and all that. It would make sense that they might do something that audacious and that unexpected.
Yeah, I like that version. What they eventually took, though, is the Victoria Club reported about $1.2 million. That's what the bookies finally. I lost 50,000. I lost whatever. In based on the amount of bags that people reported seeing them carrying out, and what the armored car guys reported carrying in, they think the actual take was ballpark between 8 and 16 million.
Wow.
So I mean, a lot of damn money. I mean,
Yeah.
like and like you've got the criminal world. You don't know. I mean, this is like Lufthansa. This is like what happened in the vault in Rhode Island. I mean, this is one of those hits that is just enormous, and it. So these guys took off with a hell of a lot of money, and as you can imagine, there is some fallout.
Yeah, there always is, isn't there? Especially with that kind of money,
Yeah.
It's just I see that they each took like 500,000 to play around with, which is way too much money for most of these guys probably to have to play around with. And they were all driving expensive new cars right away.
Yeah.
And then they needed to launder the rest of it because 500,000 each was, if you got 8 to 10 million, 15 million, that 500,000 is just kind of a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
That's just a couple, 3 million there. So
what
are the stories about how they got rid of it? Did they take it out of the country and launder it, or did they
took a lot of it to the Philippines or Tahiti and bought homes and restaurants and things like that in resort locations in places where people vacation. I know that Ray Chuck, when his son came of age, there was $6 million for him in a bank in London. His son is now a millionaire off of money was sitting for him in a bank in London. I read an article about him recently, talking about he came of age and there was a trust there for $6 million.
I tell you what, this guy, like the Lufthansa, nobody ever knew what happened to that money, but the mob ended up getting it and frittered it away somewhere between a bunch of other guys. But here you kind of know what happened, and he actually got away with the money.
Yeah. This, they a lot of it went out of the country to be in it, but they never. The police never tracked it down. They just know that somehow $6 million was smuggled, and he didn't get it through clean living and being frugal. There was a lot of money that went into, like I said, Tahiti and the Philippines. They had a guy this guy named Dennis Greedy Smith, who helped invest in these businesses for these guys, but they didn't really live long enough to spend most of them. They had really bad luck, because you got that kind of money in the underworld and people know you've got it, because it didn't take long for people to figure out that it was Ray Chuck Bennett who had stolen the money. He was the kind of guy who could pull off a job like that, and people put it together based on different, buying the guns, and he did it with 5 other guys, and they know that Bennett hangs out with this Prendergast in Mickelson, and the Kane brothers are really high-ranking members of the Painters and Dockers, and they're much higher than Ray Chuck, and they're well thought of. They've got a lot more connections in the criminal underworld. The Kane brothers are sort of higher up on the food chain, so they feel that because of their connections, they deserve a larger piece of the pie, and so there starts some friction between them, and eventually there's a bar fight between Vinnie Mickelson and Brian Kane, and Mickelson bites off Brian Kane's ear, and so over a couple
Mike Tyson there.
Yeah, right. Over a couple of pints. So Les Kane, who is a real psychopath, he's gonna kill. He's the bigger threat, and they know he is gonna kill Ray Chuck Bennett and these other two. And the Painters and Dockers support the Kane brothers. So you've got basically the entire underworld gunning for Ray Chuck and Mickelson and Prendergast, because they've got all this money, and they've got the Kane brothers and their organization after them. So on October 19th, 1978, little bit over 2 years after the robbery, Les Kane and his wife and kids come home for the evening, and three men in balaclavas break into the house waving guns, and they took his wife and children to a bedroom and locked them in, told them to be quiet. And his wife recognized Mickelson and Ray Chuck and Prendergast a lot like this is a lot like the Denny Seifert murder when his wife recognized Joey Lombardo, and they shot Les Kane in the bathroom, shot him to death, and then they took his body, threw him in the trunk, and drove him away. His body was never found. And I guess part of the painters and knockers had a code of silence. So the police asked, did she know anything? And she said, no, I don't know who did it. And, they wore masks, but she did tell Brian Kane, and he said he was going to handle it. So Ray Chuck at that point knew he was really in trouble. And he, after about a year of laying low and hiding out and different threats, he turned himself into the police on some minor charges, because he figures in police custody he'd be safe. He'll go lie low in jail for a while. He had some friends in jail, even though there are a lot of they could get him in jail, but he had some other friends in there. He was tight with a guy named Chuck Reed, I think, and he wanted to take his chances in jail. So November 12th, 1979, he was arraigned, and as they were escorting him down the back steps of the courthouse, man jumps out, shot him 3 times in the head with a snub-nosed .38, and then runs down the back steps and flees through the fence. And
how convenient that they happened to be there. They happened to know that he'd be coming down those back steps at that time. How can, with unarmed officers, how convenient.
Exactly. So they later found the fence at the back of the building had been taken apart.
Obviously well planned.
Yeah. The crowd had prevented any police chase. And I read a later account from a cop who didn't want to be named. He said that he says that police had actually cooperated with Brian Kane. The police sided more with the Kanes than with Ray Chuck. They felt that after Ray Chuck and his guys killed Les Kane in front of his family, they were too unpredictable. The Kanes were more of a reliable criminal organization. They're not going to go outside and do things in front of somebody's wife and their kids. And so you got the painters and dockers and the cops supporting the Kane brothers. So there's even somebody says that earlier in the week, Brian Kane did a practice run that the cops smuggled him in the trunk of a police car. And, so even a lot of police, when it was investigated, believed it must have been an inside job, but nobody saw anything. Nobody knew anything. It's just sort of hush hush, but most people believed it had been an inside job.
Yeah. Interesting. So what happened to the God? I see in your notes here that looks like everybody's just like there's tons. Everybody gets killed.
Right. So a couple of years later, Brian Kane is he's involved in some kind of an altercation. He's shot to death in a pub by 2 masked men. He's so 2 guys with masks shoot him in 1982. Ian Carroll, one of the other guys, was shot and killed in 1983. Laurie Prendergast, the guy who was tight with Ray Chuck, his body disappeared in 1985. He was never found. Vinnie Mickelson, he fled to the Western States. He stayed there for a lot of years, and he returned years later after everyone was dead. Normie Lee continued he lived in the Philippines and Tahiti for a while, back and forth, but he eventually ran out of money and came back for another big robbery, and he was shot to death by the police during he was trying to rob a payroll truck in 1992, and he was shot to death by the police. So, if you've got $16 million worth of cash in the underworld,
What's the moral of this story here, Cam?
The moral of the story is when you got $16 million in cash in the underworld, things can go south awful damn quick.
Yeah, everybody wants a piece of that. Everybody wants a piece of that. And then among your Confederates, they always fall out too. Everybody wants more. That's an oft-told story. I don't know if anybody's ever really gotten clean away with something like that.
No, not that I've heard. But it is a hell of a heist, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. That was a good one. And those criminals robbing criminals is, that's such a pretty smart thing to do. But
Yeah.
even when you're doing that, it seems like that. I don't know. It seems like you'd be better off to rob like Lufthansa. You have the police after you, but you don't have the underworld and the police after you.
Right. Right.
Takes a lot of guts. I did early on in the podcasting. I did a story about a guy that went around and robbed local drug dealers here in Kansas City, and I had some interaction with different people like that. If you ever watched The Wire, Omar, the character Omar, he's going around and rob drug dealers. The people that rob other criminals are the baddest of the bad. Usually, those are the guys that got the balls and the like I said, there's like a double whammy. You got other criminals after you, and you got the cops after you. And when you're in the midst of that robbery, you're more likely to get resistance than if you go into a bank or something. They're told, just don't do anything. That's like I've interviewed the Boonie Hat Bandit, who's a bank robber down here in Missouri, and he said he got caught because the bank manager at the last bank disregarded his standing instructions. Those were just to stay inside and don't do anything. The guy ran outside and saw his car and called it in, or a police car came up pretty quick after the alarm went off and gave him a description. They caught him not too far away before he could switch cars. So you're much safer robbing banks and people that work in those things, because insurance will cover that. Insurance doesn't cover those criminals' money.
No.
Crazy. No. Well, Cam, that's been great. That was a hell of a story. I'm glad you were able to find that one out. That's been a lot of fun. Or continue down our periodically dip into Australian organized crime, and we may have to branch out to another country. I don't know which other one we should go to, but I'm sure Russia. I've got a guy who is a Russian that got hold of me that's written a book, and I just need to get back in touch with him. We could do an interview of him.
Absolutely.
I can't remember his name. I'll send you the information here one of these days soon, and I need to get back to him and kind of make sure that I let him know that I'm in. I told him once I was interested, and he sent me a PDF of his book. And I just haven't got back to him to let him know, okay, just hang in there, man, and make sure I know how to get hold of you, and we'll get you on. So we'll swing out into Russia, or he's been all over Russia and Italy and Sicily, and I think maybe the Mideast. That guy's been all over, so he'll be an interesting one.
They got a hell of an underworld in Russia, man.
Yeah, they do. I was doing a story on the Russians and the franchise. Well, it wasn't really about franchise. It was about, I think, Roy DeMeo was one of those New York mobsters, Lucchese or Gambino one, that had the gas tax scam going. I mean, they made millions and millions of dollars.
Gas fed queso.
Right. And the Russians were all over that too.
Yeah.
And my research revealed that the Russians, they were so used to dealing with governmental agencies and taxing authorities and how all those worked that they kind of came up with that whole scam on how to do that set up those shell companies and buy the gas and charge other people the tax, and then don't pay it back into the state, but because they came from this corrupt society that it was just it's an art form on how you avoid any kind of taxing from authorities over there in Russia. So that will be an interesting guy to talk to. Okay, Cam, I don't really have anything else. I've got a canned exit out for this thing, so I'll just use that one. I won't try to do another one here. I gotta do another one after that that takes the COVID thing off of it. This has got a little bit of the COVID stuff on it, but saves me doing that ending every time. I just kind of do it the same each time.
Right.
Although it does kind of personalize it when you do it a little bit different each time. You like to keep people engaged and all the way to the end. But I don't know. That's all I got. You got anything else?
No, I'm good. These are good. These
These are
went
great stories. Yeah, thanks a lot for putting this research together and carrying the ball on this.
I need to come up on another couple. We gotta get another couple in the pipeline.
Yeah, really. So you going to work tonight, or you're not going in yet, are you?
Yeah, I'm off the next couple, and I'll be
That's right.
I'll be in I think next week. I was on a conference call earlier this morning, so I think
Even when you're home, when you go to work, you have to go to work, don't you? Because you got real
yeah,
time.
I'm real time, so I'm sitting at the desk. I mean, I'm up and down, but yeah, I've got sort of on the clock.
Yeah, interesting. All right, well, I'll let you get back at it, and I'll get these in the computer somehow. And don't forget to
Send
send
them
me
out.
your
And
phone stuff. All right, thanks, Cam. Talk to you later.
I'll get you.